Do you really think there could be a world war? Seriously? In this day and age? I still hear those voices as clear as if it was yesterday. We were sitting in a small Indian restaurant in Cambridge maybe 5 years ago, the spice thick in the air, the chatter of other tables dotted around, but it was pretty quiet that night, as it often is in a restaurant in Cambridge. I remember saying it plainly, without drama or fear, that, yeah, in the next 5 years, war could break out on a global scale, if I had to put a timescale on it. The reaction was incredulous. No, come on, we're too connected now. That sort of thing just can't happen anymore. I wouldn't be so sure about that, said I. And here we are, some 5 years later, and what can be said? The whole landscape has shifted. Sure, we're not at war. I was wrong on that. Though some leaders say that we actually kind of already are. But what was once seeming impossible is now looking very plausible. Indeed, NATO leaders speak publicly of preparation, and presidents, prime ministers all across the world, countries are now busy preparing and ramping up their military spending. Even headlines now warn of escalations that we once thought belonged to the history books. And people everywhere, people are wondering again, quietly maybe, late at night, maybe to themselves, wondering, could it really happen? So what do I say now, 5 years on, when the warnings feel closer to the surface, when the dynamics and precursors to war seem so much more further along, so much more advanced? This is the Higher Self Dialogues with me, your host, Anton Jarrett. Okay, let's start with what can be seen. None of us has perfect information. We're just citizens using news apps or, at best, academic research, which also isn't perfect. Unless you work at the heights of government, you can't really see what's going on. And not even at those highest levels of government are things clear. Intelligence is fragmented, intentions are obscured, miscommunication exists everywhere, and signals are misread. But some things are still visible and clear enough for even us ordinary citizens who are paying attention to see what's going on. And we see the unprecedented about turn of militarization in the wake-up call of changing geopolitical trends and currents, that the relative peace that has existed for so long that it was actually very fragile all along and able to quickly unravel. We are seeing the build-up of military forces, alliances are changing, countries are rearming, not in caution, but in urgency. And rhetoric is shifting from cooperation to confrontation. These aren't simulations or war games, but indications of actual responses to perceived risks. It feels at times like watching dark clouds roll over the horizon, blacker and faster than we expected. And we wonder, well, will this storm pass overhead, or will it break wide open above us? Just from what can be seen then, largely from political leaders as reported by the media, the idea of a world war can't be said to be just the musings of some Indian restaurant diners in ancient university towns. No, they are now the considered musings of people at the center of political power, making actual decisions about what bombs to buy and buttons to press. An observation can tell us that we are closer than ever to global conflict. A news item I saw this week from the Evening Standard here in the UK, dated 6th of July, had the headline, World War III fears as NATO chief warns of joint Xi and Putin attack. And the article suggested one possible strategy for how a global conflict might start, with some detail originating from the alliance between Russia and China. But if we stop there, we miss something rather essential. And since this is a podcast about the higher self, well, that's all about the spiritual perspective, isn't it? Other podcasts can do the geopolitical speculation to a much greater level of depth than I can here. So the second point is the higher self perspective. And from that perspective, the march towards war, or indeed away from it, is not random. Nor is it simply the result of failed diplomacy or economic competition or the hunt for resources or any one political leader's failings or actions. It is largely considered to be an energetic unfolding. See, the world has carried a backlog of unresolved energies, unresolved traumas for decades, and it has to be released. And we've seen such releases in the past. In the last century, there were two huge releases looked at from this spiritual perspective. We always think of war as something that begins with politicians, but in truth, war is a collective consequence, a collective result of the unfinished inner work of the whole global population, of imbalances left to fester and shadows left unexamined, which then play out. Of course, this is the spiritual perspective. This is not something that you can read headlines about. It's not something that is visible to the five senses. We're talking about spiritual insight here. The moment when this energy breaks through, though, painful as it may be, is a great release. But it's unpleasant. It's hugely unpleasant. It's the unpleasant good. It's like a forest fire that rages through deadwood, burning everything painfully, but clearing the way for renewal. And in that, there is paradox. War, which we fear greatly, rightly so for its destructiveness, is also a mirror of both how far we've come and how far we have yet to go. It is a resetting dynamic. Yet, this is where things get interesting, because there is another current moving alongside this one, and it rather complicates things, I have to say, but in a good way, a pleasant good way. Spiritually, humanity has, in fact, you might be surprised, advanced far enough that full planetary annihilation, the complete destruction of life on Earth, is no longer in alignment with our evolutionary trajectory or the complex of forces in which we have our life and being. There's a fear, and that fear, as seductive as it is, belongs to another epoch entirely, but one that we've outgrown, is that we can extinguish ourselves, but extinction is not the destiny we face. That is simply now the shadow speaking, echoing the fears of a world that believed in total doom. And it's a reasonable fear considering what weapons we have available to us and the level of destruction of the last total global conflict. But massive suffering, widespread destruction, catastrophic war, yes, these things do still exist as possibilities. And if we do not awaken, if we do not integrate, then we may walk very dangerously close to them, or in fact make them happen in some way. But the critical distinction is this: the brink is not the end. It's a turning point, and it's a time for choice collectively. And the choice is, do we live out and manifest the advanced evolution that is our potential, and which we have in fact reached to some extent? Or do we revert to older forms of consciousness, which are familiar, which even seem inevitable? And what we will witness in the time ahead is the playing out of this choice in live action and motion. And so we'll see the old come out and show itself, and also the new try to assert itself. And the key thing is, this is the real key, it's not determined or inevitable which one will win. We have to wait and see. So we really are in a movie here where the habitual old warrior self is put to the test, and the deeper, higher consciousness is called into action. And the end of the movie is not yet written. So what will win out? Will we repeat the mistakes of the past, or will we forge a new path? If I was back in that restaurant in Cambridge and I was asked today, so what do you think? I would have to say, it could really go either way. But I think there is actually a chance we might just pull through, that the higher vibration might just get the upper hand. And I mean, it's surely worth a shot, isn't it? So what can we do about it? Well, for those of us who feel that they see this possibility, maybe you are one of them, it means speaking up. It means doing what you can in whatever way you can to make it known that the possibility exists. Maybe you are a political thinker and you've studied past conflict, and your way of expressing this possibility is by giving conferences on another way forward. Or perhaps you are just a member of the public who doesn't normally vote, and you also think there's a chance, a small chance, a big chance of avoiding massive destructive conflict. And you decide that in the next election in your country, you will vote, and you'll vote for people who seem to offer the best chance at aligning this possibility. Individually, we might not be able to do very much at all against this big picture, but collectively, if a critical mass grows large enough to align with a mode of expression and being, one that can tune in and tap into that higher way, well, then maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's the choice. And so the choice is simple, but not easy. In fact, far from that. Will we meet this moment with division or with integration? With fear or with clarity? With hatred or with presence? And what does it even take to make a choice? And these are big questions with big answers. The brink of war is a dangerous place, but it is also a place of enormous possibility. I don't think we've been so close to total conflict since the Second World War, but never before have we had such tools, such awareness, such choices at our disposal to turn away from it. And this is the paradox that we live in. I remember reading once that the Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest humanity came to ending itself. But perhaps today we are closer, not because the weapons are bigger, but because the conflicts are subtler, spread across many fronts, hidden in technological warfare, information warfare, economic warfare. And yet the possibility to step back is still there. It's not gone away. And perhaps this is the higher message in all of this. The message that even now, and even in the future, we are capable of turning away. And even now, we can say, enough. But it starts within. as with everything, not just with governments and diplomats, but with us. How do we meet conflicts? How do we meet our own conflicts? How do we engage with the voices inside us that we'd rather silence? Do we bomb them into submission, or do we sit with them, learn from them, integrate them? These questions sound lofty, maybe, but they are where it begins and perhaps where it ends. So today, as the headlines blare and the talking heads speculate, pause a moment, step back from the noise and listen deeply to what your own being is telling you. The world may be on the brink, but the brink is a place of choice, not inevitability. From the simple observation, we can see that a global conflict is becoming more likely. And from the higher spiritual perspective, we can say that there are spiritual, energetic reasons for why we are going in that direction. Both arrows seem to point to an increasing likelihood of conflict. But still, from that same higher perspective, this doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion. There is still the possibility of a higher way out. War is not inevitable, but nor is peace guaranteed. It might seem that we're powerless to influence anything, but that too is an illusion, and maybe that's all we need to remember. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Higher Self Dialogues. I'll meet you again next time, but for now, take care and be well.